So, dear friends, welcome. We are happy that you are here. There is somebody who will be doing this, but I am Sister Malifa. I am a missionary sister of Our Lady of Africa, and I'm also the co-executive secretary of Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation Commission of the Union of Superiors General and the International Union of Superiors General. This webinar is organized by the Regenerative Agriculture Working Group, and I'm sure many of the members are here. And as you can see, our title is Caring for Creation and Protecting Our Food, a Shared Responsibility. It is a shared responsibility for all of us, and we are happy that you are here. So I would like to welcome Mr. Rael to officially welcome all the participants and to give us the introduction of the webinar. So Sister Rael is a member of the Servants of the Light of Christ in Benin with experience in French and Italy. She is a registered nurse with studies in sociology and anthropology. She supports youth, families, and community development initiatives. She's a former Secretary General and General Counsellor with leadership experience in her congregation. She is the head of projects since 2024, leading mission and development programs. She combines healthcare, social science, and leadership expertise in community service. So, Sister Rael, you are welcome to officially welcome participants and give the introduction of our webinar. Thank you.
Yes, I am here. Here I am. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this very important webinar. I want to welcome warmly all the participants that are here with us today. And thank you for connecting from different communities and different places on this planet. I would like to thank in particular the participants, the speakers, and the interpreters for the generous contribution, their availability, and their experience, expertise, and their and the commitment that have allowed us to organize this meeting for all of you. We are sincerely grateful to all of you for being here, and we hope that each one of you will proactively contribute to our debate so that we can reach together the goals of this meeting. This webinar is important and significant at the same time. First, we would like to seize the opportunity to celebrate something at the world level, meaning the World Environment Day and the day devoted to food security. On this occasion, we remember our common responsibility, meaning taking care of creation, and also we need to work so that the food that people eat is healthy and produced while respecting the human beings and the dignity of the environment. The goal of this webinar is that of helping us developing a toolkit for regenerative agriculture. We need to identify the activities that we are carrying out at the moment, especially in order to identify the inspiring initiatives and the needs and the adequate responses and also the challenges that we face and the ways in which we can support these activities. So we need to understand the various worries and issues related to food security, also related to the use of chemicals and chemical fertilizers too. At the same time, we need to raise the awareness of religious communities and they need to understand their environmental responsibility. It is an opportunity for advocacy and on the topic. This webinar also wants to tackle the issues and worries related to food security, linked to the harmful chemicals and excessive use of pesticides and fertilizers, while raising the awareness of religious communities because they need to become environmentally responsible. It is an opportunity for advocacy, for education, and for dialogue on food security and regenerative agriculture as concrete ways to have a healthier and more sustainable future. Secondly, we aim to identify and share the best practices, especially the local knowledges, the method of organic agriculture, and concrete experiences coming from different contexts. So there is too much noise. It is very hard to interpret. Please switch off your microphone, please, sisters. So we also want to strengthen collaboration, and we want to build a common base that can guide and support the community engaged in regenerative agriculture and also in the environmental commitment. Regenerative agriculture is more and more recognized as one of the concrete solutions that can really be a sign of hope in the face of climate change, and it is different from the system that is exploiting the soils and endangering the ecosystem. So regenerative agriculture restores the health of soils, protects biodiversity, preserves water, reduces dependence on chemicals, and contributes to capture the carbon in the atmosphere. It doesn't only heal the soil, but also it strengthens food security and supports farmers and the local communities and favors a more just, a more sustainable relationship with the creation. So, for many reasons, it is a concrete answer to the urgent call to look after our common house. Indeed, we would like to invite those among you who are interested in regenerative agriculture. Please join our working group in order to collaborate and to share experiences because all forms of collaboration are precious while we continue building together our common mission. Thank you very much once again for being here and for your commitment and for the openness that you are showing. We wish to all of you a fruitful webinar that can allow us to learn lots of things and to exchange our views and that can inspire us and give us a sign of hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sister Raquel, for that warm welcome to our participants. So now we will go to the prayer. Sister Celine will be leading us in prayer so that the Lord can guide us to really listen, not just with our ears, but with our heart. So Sister Selena is a member of the Sisters of St. Michael the Archangel from Nigeria. She holds a master's in spiritual therapy and counseling and a Bachelor of Education. His experience in education, counseling, and community development. She served as a farm manager with expertise in agricultural management, a former principal and a supervisor, providing academic and institutional leadership. She promotes holistic formation and community well-being through education and counseling. Sister, please lead us.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, the Creator of heaven and earth, we come to you in gratitude for our world, our home, common home, the earth. We ask you to bless all our plans, discussions, and decisions of today's meeting with great success as we plan to bring sanity to our degraded Mother Earth. We have come together so that we may know how to nurture our earth and to face the troubles of the earth at this difficult time. Here we are in your name from different locations of the world. We ask you to enlighten the darkness of our hearts so that we can together find permanent ways to nurture and care for our Mother Earth. We make this prayer through the intercession of St. Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of ecology. To you, God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sister, for that inspiring prayer. Now,
Thank you, sister.
We will go to our first speaker. Our first speaker is Molly Burhans. She's a cartographer, ecological landscape designer, data scientist, environmental advocate, and founder. She led the creation of the first unified global map of Catholic ecclesiastical jurisdictions and works on scalable land-based climate solutions. A founder of Good Lands, supporting regenerative agriculture and ecological restoration projects across local to regional scales. She holds an MS in ecological design and has taught at Columbia University in urban design. Recognized as a UN Young Champion of the Earth, National Geographic Explorer, and Ashoka Fellow. Currently a social science student at the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas and fellow at the Leonin Institute for AI and Emerging Technologies. Molly, you are welcome to share your knowledge and wisdom with us.
Thank you so much for having me here, Sister Malifa, and thank you everyone for sharing your time.
Lucia, can you unshare? She will share her own.
Okay, can you see these slides?
Okay, yes.
Okay, wonderful. So today I'm going to talk about moving from observation to regeneration. Within the time period, there's going to be a couple parts of this that I skip over pretty fast, but I'm going to talk about sharing a PDF of the whole talk, hopefully for you all after this. So the structure is going to be, first, we're going to understand land ecologically. What does it really mean to have a regenerative farm? What does it mean to relate to land ecologically? First, we have to understand some basic terms about landscape ecology. Then I'm going to kind of breeze through ideas about what ecologically designing with land looks like. I'm going to talk about a regenerative agriculture case study, a farm that I helped lead the design of over 10 years ago that has since been implemented and is changing lives on the ground and connects to virtually all of the Corporal acts of mercy. I'm just going to end with a note about how our call to steward the land around us and our call to love our neighbor are integrally connected. So understanding land ecologically. I want to start with everyone just take a deep breath and imagine one of your favorite places outdoors. Are there birds chirping when you imagine it? Is there water? What do the plants look like? Is the landscape around you hilly? Is it flat? Is it high, jagged mountains? Are there insects, animals, friends, sisters, brothers? I'm going to introduce you to one of my favorite places outside. It's where this little stone is. It says, "Bidden or not bidden, God is present." And it's on the site of a monastery where a bunch of my Benedictine friends live. Now, for the sake of this talk, I did use hypothetical analyses of this site. So if you are from this site or familiar with it, I won't say the specific name. I did that for privacy. I don't share the exact like solar analyses. But this is one of my favorite sites that I've been going to for over 15 years since I was in college. And it's also where I first learned about the rule of St. Benedict and how it calls us to look upon all the goods and vessels of the monastery as if they were consecrated vessels of the altar. This radical calling to stewardship that goes back to the very beginnings of religious life. Here's a picture of the stream that's right near that little plaque that I showed you, where I've spent a lot of time sitting on that rock and praying and pondering. So this is right on the site where that arrow points. If we look at the site and all those different things I just told you to imagine, the sound of water, that can be extracted in a map and looked at. There's the babbling brook. There's intermittent streams, there's wetlands on this specific site, really complex and diverse. There's also buildings around this place. Maybe somebody's walking past me going to a hermitage. There's pathways, there's ways that people get around. There's handicapped / universally accessible paths, there's trails, there's places where cars go, and there's places where trucks go even. There's vegetation of all different types here, including some amazing old oak trees, and in the summer, it's covered with wildflower meadows. It's also topography, which shapes where the water goes on the site and how it operates, and also how the sun hits the site. This is in the northern hemisphere, so in the south-facing aspect of this site is where you want to put solar panels or have big windows to capture a lot of sun in the winter. There's also soils, places where you would really want to plant if you decided to do a vegetable garden, and places where you don't want to plant, and maybe you should think about other ways to deal with the site. And there's also all the other types of critters that live here, whether they're great horned owls or butterflies and pollinators or small chipmunks. Not shown here, the occasional bear wandering through the site. The universe is composed of subjects to be communed with, not a collection of objects to be used, is what Father Thomas Berry said. When we think about landscapes, we have to keep this kind of integral view in mind. They are systems, not merely collections of objects. When we sit there or walk there in our favorite sites, it's not just a brook. It's not just a bird. It's a brook with a bird, with a prayer, with a place. Landscapes are not simply a collection of trees, fields, roads, and buildings. They are dynamic systems in which water, nutrients, energy, plants, animals, and people interact. And every single part of the system influences the other parts. And to understand place, we must look at relationships rather than isolated elements. So how do the parts work together? That's the first kind of way to understand land. To dive a little deeper, everything exists in a spatial pattern. When you think about the site that you're at, this is really critical for once you get to changing that site, right? So we're learning how to read the landscape so we can change it with the ecology mind. There's edge forests, there's core forests. Some of these are really technical terms, so I'm not going to dive in, but I hope this picture helps illustrate that there's all these kind of different things happening. Our riparian corridor, so that's kind of the plants in the area around a long water feature like a stream or a river. There's perhaps farmland in a town center. The arrangement of features across land matters tremendously. And to understand a place ecologically, we must understand the pattern. So what is where, and also the process. What is happening because of that arrangement? Do you have trees? Perhaps, but are they fragmented, disconnected patches, or are they a connected network that supports habitat flow and connectivity? The fragmented space might limit the movement of many species, and also it might cause a lot of issues if there is no buffer between the water and you have uncontrolled runoff. Whereas if you have this nice connected corridor, it will slow and sink water. And when I say that, just imagine that water, you've poured it onto a small piece of land. If there's no plant there, it's just going to keep rolling, especially if the soil's dry, right? And that can gather a lot of speed as it goes downhill, and that can cause erosion when we are talking about big scales of landscapes and rain. Whereas if you have a ton of trees planted or bushes, it's going to often slow and sink that water, restore the aquifer, and prevent erosion. So it's not just what is there, it's where those things are that makes a big difference. I'm going to invite you to just look at this picture for a couple seconds. Just what do you see here? Bearing in mind patterns, we see different settlements, human settlements. We see a church. We see steep, thinking about topography, steep hills. You can't put a farm in some of these places. You can maybe put it in others. We see that there's the confluence of two rivers, a little bit muddy. Perhaps there's some erosion issues, or maybe there was just a big storm. Different patterns create different ecological outcomes, and location matters as much as composition. You can go out on the site of a monastery and you can catalog all the species, and that's only one part. Knowing where they are is the other part. The third principle to keep in mind is a landscape is made of all these different patches and corridors and matrices. This is kind of the best way to talk about it, and it's very intuitive language-wise. A patch is just different from the things around it, pretty much. A forest grove, a wetland, a meadow, it can even be a man-made thing like an urban park. And a corridor is something that's long and narrow. These often promote the movement of species. They act as stepping stones, and species movement is important so that you can have different populations of the same species that promote gene flow and biodiversity. The matrix is the dominant background landscape. So shown here is an agricultural region, but we can zoom in and out, and we're about to get to scale. Me sitting in my apartment in Rome, I am in a matrix of a a stone floor, you could say, if you're right above me. But if we zoom out, I'm in what's called an urban matrix. And if we zoom really, really far and position the satellite image somewhere, it could be a kind of mixture of this urban to rural transect. Just think that about what kind of matrix is around you and also what scale you're looking at, which goes on to the next point. Scale changes what you see when you look at a landscape. When you're considering a small garden bed plot, the ideas of regenerative landscape are going to change drastically from when you're considering a large estate or a property that you're planning, or even an entire campus. Further, if you keep going out, a city or even an entire region or watershed. Now you can also plan smaller properties like an estate within an entire, say, province of your religious order. And right now we aren't going to go into that, but that's a really interesting concept of taking the small and the large at the same time. But here, I just want you to think about when you're talking about the landscape around you and designing it and working with it for regenerative, healthy food, you have to be thinking about the scale that you're working with. So the scale changes what you are looking at, also changes the questions you're going to ask when you're implementing a program of agriculture and sustainable food. So at the scale of a garden bed, you can say, what plants belong here? Are you going to plant your tomatoes here, or is there too much sun and they'll wither, so you should plant them somewhere else? Or are you going to, say, plant your lettuce here, or maybe that's a type of soil that really won't support it? On the property scale, you start to think about larger scale systems interactions of water, soil, vegetation in a more broad way. At the campus scale, you start to think about master planning and how the whole system functions together. If you just think about one thing at a time, like your solar panels, without stepping back and taking a moment to do kind of cohesive view of something, you might end up putting your solar panels on, say, the best place that you could actually have a farm soil-wise or aspect-wise. Or perhaps you might accidentally put those somewhere where, maybe planting trees could have reduced your heating or your cooling costs and energy usage by 40% even. Trees make a huge difference in relation to buildings. So all of these different scales, once you start getting bigger out, asking these questions. In the city scale, you can ask, what are the green corridors and habitat networks? If you're back on that monastery at the start of this, are you supporting those habitat networks? What if you're the only patch in a matrix of overdeveloped land? You could actually be harboring a really important space for species, and that's important to consider. Movement is a critical consideration. Landscapes aren't just static images, they are dynamic systems. Seeds disperse, water flows downhill. A lot of this stuff is intuitive, but it's important to say it out loud, I feel. Water flows downhill because of gravity. Gravity is very important. We can't escape it for the most part. Soil sifts, animals migrate, pollinators travel, nutrients cycle, and people migrate. And a healthy landscape where things are arranged in a way well with nature enables beneficial movement, such as species, in a way that doesn't put them directly in, say, elephants having issues with farmers, which I know is a big issue in some parts. The Jane Goodall Institute has worked in India, and they figured out these sustainable systems where they can harmonize humans and the natural systems around them. Now, also an example would be of harmful movement would be maybe if you built your settlement right next to a gigantic bat cave, then we might have another zoonotic disease spilling over. So where we put things is really important, and where we put them needs to be considered with the movement. Water ultimately is the master organizer of spaces. Thinking of St. Francis of Assisi, sister water. And while on our little scale, when you even think about that runoff that we talked about earlier, it might not seem like a lot. On the big scale, we're talking thousands of years, millions of years. We've got the Grand Canyon was made by water. Water is slowly dictating the shape of the places around us and how we interact with us. And so it needs to be approached really respectfully. And if we plant well, we can actually recharge aquifers and make sure that all the water around us is functioning in a healthy system. Disturbance is natural. This is important to keep in mind if you're planning an agriculture or ecosystems restoration project. Landscapes are dynamic. Wildfires happen, and some plants actually need them. Windstorms happen. Drought happens, flooding happens. Climate change is making these happen in excess, unfortunately, but some degree of these is pretty natural. So the question is, if you're going to make a sustainable farm, have you mapped out your property, and do you know if you're about to put it in a place that has a 100-year flood zone that maybe is starting to flood every 10 years? So that whole project is going to be wiped out soon. Now, these are things that are important to consider for resiliency, for regeneration in the long term, because when you plant a tree, that's just the start of a long-term relationship you're building with the land. So understanding from that question, what disturbance shaped the places historically, and connectivity and diversity build resilience. So a disconnected landscape becomes vulnerable to species loss, erosion, flooding, ecological collapse, and a landscape is healthier when the habitats are connected, the species diversity is high, ecological functions are distributed. So resilience comes from relationships and diversity within the landscape, not unlike our own communities, right? And then humans are part of the landscape. We know this from integral ecology and human ecology. We're here, and that's a very good thing. We are not outside of nature, and roads, farms, monasteries, convents, churches, cities, and gardens are all landscape elements that influence ecological processes. And the question is not whether we humans are shaping landscapes. We know that's a fact, but whether our actions increase or decrease that ecological health, which we've talked about in the slides leading up to this, that's the question that we have to ask. This becomes the foundation of ecological design, is intentionally arranging our human activities so they support rather than degrade natural processes. We support those natural water flows. We support teeming abundance of life. We support soils that are healthy. That, in summary, is how you can understand land. That's a lot of information. But I think it's really important to even think about all these really critical foundational things about reading landscapes before we dive into, okay, what does it mean to actually have an ecologically designed farm? What does it mean to live Laudato Si beyond having recycled bottles, right? And maybe planting a few trees. We now know it's not just about planting a few trees, it's about planting those trees in the right place so that they thrive. And maybe even provide shade in a critical place where our students can really use that outdoors. A landscape is a system, and it's really important to always keep these factors in mind. And these are from fundamentally Richard Foreman, Land Mosaics, and I cite this in the slides. He's the father of landscape ecology. He's actually still alive at the Harvard Graduate School of Design, and he's really codified landscape ecology, landscape science into an entire domain that many people have followed, thousands of scientists since. So ecological land management and design. Regenerative design is another word. I'm just going to use ecological land management here. It's an approach to land that involves practice of caring for a common home by working with these created patterns and processes. It's understanding the environment before you make changes to it. If you were a doctor, you wouldn't go in and do surgery on a patient without having some imagery or idea of what's going on there. We're kind of doctors of the landscape, right? We're internists. You could think of a civil engineer maybe who might have to come in for a specialized thing like a retaining wall or a road as a surgeon, but we're here like the internist kind of coordinating things, and we have to have some basic understanding of what's going on so that we can see the landscape as it is, and we can judge what to do, and we can act in right ways. When I say sustainable agriculture, I'm using it interchangeably with regenerative agriculture for simplicity here. I know that that's not technically correct, so forgive me. But just for the sake of this presentation, it's both. And I only have like 7 minutes left, so there's not much time for me to keep using that in the wrong place of regeneration. But I want to emphasize the difference between sustainable versus industrial agriculture. Sustainable agriculture mimics what's going on in nature and the flows, and Reggie's going to talk about the awesome ways that you can view a system and the solutions that plug into this. I'm giving just a big overview here. So that's sustainable, is really designing with nature, while as industrial agriculture is designing in a technocratic paradigm, just focused often on maximizing profits, maximizing outputs in the short term. When I look at ecological landscapes, I actually think about St. Thomas Aquinas quite often. The ecological approach to land applies, as I see it, principles of natural law to the landscape by discerning the wisdom of inherent order embedded in creation and working with rather than against the forms, the functions, the teleology, the patterns to cultivate landscapes that promote the flourishing of people, ecosystems, and the common good. There's a lot of foundation here in how we can philosophically look at this and then understand it in reality with science. I'm going to skip through this, but there's principles to ecological design that pretty much tell us to follow the function of forms in the landscape. And you can deduce these just from what I pretty much told you about how to read a landscape. We want to work with where the wind is going. We want to work with where the sun is shining. We want to work with the existing shape of the landscape. We want to build wetlands and roads and places where we don't have to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in expensive and energetic intensive, say, swales that are built out of concrete, where in some instances we can just use, natural systems and work with them and move something about 100 meters over and prevent that. We want to work with local systems and how they operate rather than putting all these exotic plants that might be even invasive and take a lot of intensive care. We want to minimize the resource inputs. If we plant a bunch of plants that have a lot of really good nutrients in their leaves, when those leaves fall to the ground, if you design the system well, you won't even have to really put fertilizer on that system often. After a couple years, it can self-fertilize and establish. It's amazing, and I'm so excited to see what the people giving more talks about the details will potentially get into with how these systems really feed themselves. You can maximize ecosystem services, maximize pollinators so that they do the work. We work with nature rather than against it. And you have to think about that motion, that dynamicness of the landscape. You might be starting with small trees, but someday they'll be massive, and you have to account for that. And of course, we have to integrate the human use with the ecological function. So my time with regenerative agriculture has shown me that making a farm, designing a farm, and implementing it is so much more than just food systems. This is part of a project that I did in conjunction with the Regenerative Design Group in gardening the community in a neighborhood where over less than 5% of these kids went on to college. And what happens is this NGO implemented this design where we had understood the landscape and made this regenerative plan, like this solar this greenhouse is right where the only place in the site that really gets actually 6 hours of sun all seasons of the winter. This is really far north in the United States, right? And now they can grow food year round there. So it's just things being mindful of, sensory experience, even the refuge away and the soil types. So over pretty much all of these kids go on to college. And what we see is they don't get involved with gangs, with the crime in the area. And it's all the ministries that you can think about with supporting youth pretty much tied together in this farm. It's about so much more than food. It's about human health. It's about human flourishing. It's about education. And it's about not just growing plants. It's about growing futures and opportunities. So I'm going to skip this. You can take things to a larger scale, but we aren't going to go there today. So to close, a little bit of Catholic context. Pope Francis so eloquently discussed and really broke open the conversation on regenerative agriculture. Even if he didn't use specifically the words regenerative agriculture, he talked a bit about sustainable agriculture in Laudato Si and then further in Querida Amazonia. But it's not the first time a pope has talked about this and related subjects. Pope Benedict XVI talked about in Caritas and Veritate, human ecology deeply. And in Moderate Magisteria, we had John the 23rd for the first time really talking about agriculture profoundly within an encyclical. In Popolari and Progressio, we have Paul VI also talking about land and place and its social connection. This is all to say that caring for creation, caring for our land, and thinking about how we can be better ecological stewards is deeply rooted in our Catholic magisterial history, in addition to our calling from saints like St. Francis and their examples, and from Laudato Si and all of the documents that have come out and conferences now that we're seeing happen that really bring in the science to support what we've been talking about for a while. And it's important to notice that Indigenous communities have also been cultivating this kind of stewardship for a lot longer than we have. So there's a lot to learn there and a lot of reparation to be made. If we're to feed the hungry, we must grow that food somewhere. Thinking about the 7 corporal acts of mercy. If we're going to shelter the homeless, we have to provide them a home somewhere. If we give drink to the thirsty, we should probably protect those aquifers and that water so we stop giving people poisonous water in the first place. If we're going to bury the dead, we have to do that in a place that's a landscape. If we're going to visit and heal the sick, we should keep in mind that the way that we use and manage our land has a profound impact on human physical and mental well-being. If you're in Europe right now in this heat wave, having trees around you is just one example of how you can tamper down the effects on human health and risk. If we're going to clothe the naked, we should probably think about where our waste is going and how that impacts land and in turn impacts pollution. And visiting the imprisoned, there would be less people in prison if we actually design the landscapes around us to support human flourishing. There's so much information about how pollutants and land functions can really impact human mental development, and the most vulnerable, which are the neonatal development of a fetus, where the pollutants come in and cause the most harm easily earliest in life. So we need to be thinking about all of these things that we're called to in the Corporal Acts of Mercy and how our land can support human flourishing. Because every acre entrusted to our care is an opportunity to feed the hungry, heal creation, promote health, strengthen communities, and make the gospel visible through our relationship with each other and God's creation. Thank you.
Wow, Molly, that was wonderful. And I will not be able to recap all the things you have said. We have learned a lot of new things. And one thing that I find very important is you say cultivating the land is not just growing food. It is about relationship. And I think if we keep it as a relationship, not just any relationship, but a good relationship, that will change our way of approaching the land. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So now, to give the translators 1 minute to breathe before we have the second speaker, we'll just listen to a short music of 1 minute so that the translators can breathe a bit. Now we go to our second speaker. Reginaldo is born in Guatemala, agroecology innovator, entrepreneur, and regenerative agriculture leader, founder of the Regenerative Agriculture Alliance, and co-founder of Tree Range Farms, develops poultry-centered regenerative agriculture systems inspired by the indigenous knowledge and landscape restoration principles, promotes regenerative food systems that integrate ecological restoration, economic viability, and social equity, advances farming models that support farmer autonomy, community wealth building, and resilient local food economies, works to support small-scale and underserved farmers while restoring soil health, biodiversity, and ecosystem function. And he is going to talk to us about responsible food production and consumption for community well-being today. Reginald, you are most welcome. Do you want to share your screen, or we can move ahead with our screen?
Yes,
okay.
I'll share my screen.
Okay, good.
Can you see it now?
Yes, we do. Does everybody see the screen?
Yes, yes.
So welcome.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you. And building on that amazing presentation by Molly and all of that knowledge that goes behind design, I'm going to focus mostly on telling you a story that resembles how we are feeding ourselves now and how we are seeking to feed, at this point, hundreds of thousands of families through a system that Center on Poultry has given us, because of the nature of poultry, a global solution under a design that we are now scaling significantly. So, first of all, though, just to touch up on the science behind regeneration, the way we see it from an ancestral perspective, and as we were taught from childhood, we really are not, as farmers, we are not producers of anything. We are simply stewards in a process by which energy is transformed and has been transformed. It cannot be created, it cannot be destroyed, it can only be transformed. And nature and the evolutionary process of the earth itself has created those patterns that now allows us, when we dig deeper into our indigenous intellect, meaning that intellect that we are born with, that knowledge that was written in us before we were born, and that is then cultivated as we grow, that shows us that there is really only 3 places on the planet where energy is transformed at the largest scale. And that energy transformation and the biophysics and the chemistry associated with it is the center of our logical system framework. The first thing is photosynthesis. And by the way, photosynthesis is happening on land and on the ocean and all around. It's not just that one place, but photosynthesis is that first place where energy that is just floating around, CO2 and all kinds of other forms of energy through this magnificent phenomena, is transformed from that energy that is not edible to creatures like microbes and bacteria and animals to pastures and leaves and even carrots and apples that we harvest. There is the intervention of animals where a lot of the photosynthetic products that are generated are not edible to us or to well, in this case, they are edible to a multitude of species, not necessarily edible to us, right? So this is where livestock production came from, literally, whether it's the desert where multitude of mammals and other animals eat photosynthetic outputs, grasses, and other things. And then as a result of that breaking down of those molecules that came out of photosynthesis, then those animals grow, but they also poop and they pee. And that broken down, structured, molecularly speaking, goes into the soil where then can be eaten and metabolized by the smallest inhabitants of the planet in the soil. Those are the 3 places where we focus our energy for the story of today. We're not going to talk about oceans and other things where the biophysics and chemistry of the planet is identical. It's simply transformation of energy, and everything we see, including ourselves, we are an expression of that energy. We are made of the energy of the earth, of the elements of the earth, and we are a reflection of how we treat this space out there. So, excuse me. So with that in mind, we think of food as medicine, food as sacred, food as nourishment, and food as a foundation of community. And within that very simple framework, we have then built in this ancestral understanding of how this energy transforms, and we have chosen the livestock of our choice. By the way, in the livestock of the planet is where a lot of the energy gets transformed at the fastest speed. Photosynthesis is fast, but truly, a tree takes 30, 40 years to develop. A grassland takes, 6 months to grow to a place where it can be grazed. And yet a chicken eating forages or a cow can transform that energy in 48 hours. He has digested it. In another 78 hours, it has turned it into nutrients for the soil and other plants. So the animal, the livestock side of the 3 layers is where the energy is transformed the fastest in the context of energy transformation. And that allowed us to understand our entry point. Now, not just any livestock has application on a global scale. And that's why we chose poultry, because it's the one that gives us a blueprint for global impact. So as we think of that, if you put the poultry in its natural habitat, which is foundational to return animals to their natural habitat, then you have a jungle animal under trees and all kinds of other perennial cover, which restores those foundational ecological functions that Molly was referring to, and also allows us to tap all three layers of energy transformation. This gives us immediate outputs, eggs and fruits and nuts and meat and so on. But some of that energy is not immediately edible to us, but it is edible to trillions, quadrillions of little fungi and bacteria and so on. So as they do their job, this manure and other things that came out of the chicken get transformed into grains and vegetables and medicinal herbs, full plates of food. And some of that energy goes back to the system as a recirculating system of energy. We took that and turned it into an actual landscape design centered on poultry. This is a real unit. You can populate this with native species of the space where the system is being deployed. The poultry is raised under that canopy in its natural environment, completely outdoors. Now, this is not just like putting a few chickens in the backyards. I'm very familiar with that because I grew up in Guatemala and we lived with chickens our whole lives. But this is taking those traditional ways and actually structuring them for large-scale food systems development. That's what we have done. And so as we do that, this larger scale management of energy, where there is no chickens anymore, allows us to weave that energy into a multitude of crops like nuts, multitude of vegetables. We have tried over 250 different varieties of vegetables that are symbiotic with the poultry manure and the other organic matter that we mix with it, from squash to corn to, I mean, you name it, we have probably raised it. Fruits, ancestral corn, garlic, ancestral beans that we brought from our homelands. In this case, our corn, which is sacred to us, that is now 100% supported with this system. There's no toxic inputs, by the way, just so you know what we're talking about. This is the story of the current farm where I am. It's a 31 hectare farm. It's the latest of 14 farms that we have launched in Minnesota and Wisconsin and Iowa in the US. We also deployed farms in Mexico, Guatemala, and recently we trained over 125 professionals in Ecuador, and we have now built a blueprint for deploying these systems and these processes all over where there is basic conditions like economic and social and ecological that allows us to do this basic work. So we took this farm, I did it, pretty much like what Molly was describing. But before we did that, we brought all the elders and our spiritual leaders from all different backgrounds to center the energy and to build the spiritual grounding that allows us to access that ancestral knowledge and that indigenous intellect. And as we did that, then we started mapping out all the different places and the different things that we wanted to do. We got further into very accurate detailing of that, research all of the native species that were going to go into that space, that belong in this space, that evolve in this space, but some of them very valuable economically as well as ecologically. So these are hazelnuts, which are probably, they are a global species. They are not just from this region. Elderberries are also very global. We have varieties of this in Europe, Latin America, and here in the northern part of the world, of the north part of the world. We restored the natural water flows. These are rainwater catching systems at a large scale that supports the whole landscape. We also mapped out the orientation according to the orientation of the sun and the slope and the water flows, planted all of the perennial crops that we needed to recover this space and restore the hydrology, the biology. And before we did that, we put this perennial cover system to start harvesting some carbon because this land was toxic from over 40 years of high inputs, toxic inputs. So we needed to detoxify it. This crop was not edible because it was too toxic. We took it to the lab and we tested all kinds of agrochemical residue in it. So we didn't want to eat that. So we put it back for the microbes and the fungi to do the job. And as we did that, we also started building infrastructure that would allow us to shelter chickens and so on, making them as simple as possible, but fully functional so that we could reduce labor, improve the protection of the animals. The farm, once it was designed, we moved on to implementing it. And again, this is the very beginning. This is right after we stopped the corn and soybean rotations that had been in this space. This story is a story that has replicated in many places now. This is now preparing, now that the units are built for the chickens. The unit really is just a sheltered 2 paddocks. The chickens are rotated back and forth. And there is a perennial cover that is also food, produces food like nuts and other fruits, and also fruits, and protects the poultry and provides them with a natural habitat according to the jungle-like ancestral habitat of Southeast Asia. The places also look beautiful, but highly productive. This place now can feed over 750 people, even as families, as we are at the beginning of the deployment. We can raise over 35,000 chickens, and we can also restore all of these other species that provide more food than just the chicken. It's not, the chicken is the center, but it isn't really the ultimate goal. This is more recent, fall of 2005, as the farm was not completed, but mostly completed. We still need to put more production units in that forest. This is what it looks pretty much like almost any landscape where people have chickens, except scientifically verified to be balanced in terms of energy flows and so on, and health of animals. The landscape is really, like my son says, is a postcard farm, because it's like picture perfect farming, but at the same time that is fully natural and incredibly productive. Also, native species start to come back. All kinds. We have counted over 50 native species that have made their homes back in this space again. This is a hazelnut. It doesn't bother the hazelnut. This worm eats some of it, but the hazelnut still produces a lot of nuts. This is a Luna moth. It's a native species of this region that is almost extinct and now has shown up at the farm. We also established teams that are doing the scientific verification of the process. So we monitor soil health, we monitor plant health, and so on, as a way to structure this energy management systems that we are talking about. As we do that, we have been building large communities. Our team is now over 40 people. Just in the core team, we own a processing facility for poultry, and we have built a lot more community infrastructure around these farms that have been deployed around each one of these regions. As we do that, we also built a brand for the products that come out of the system to feed our communities. We need only a very small portion of the production of a farm. Most of it actually goes to market because the production is significant. It's not just a few chickens. And so, but we do, I mean, I haven't bought a chicken for a very, very long time. We grow all of our food. And again, not just the chickens, but the vegetables and nuts and the fruits and everything else for a full plate. But the chicken being the center also allows us to create economic systems. It's really a community of sectors of enterprises and groups mirror the ecosystem on the land. If we have hazelnuts, we build hazelnut processing, hazelnut distribution. This case, we got chickens. So we build poultry processing, poultry branding, distribution. And as that is built, farmers come together, workers come together, people who buy the chickens come together, communities who want to bring this chicken to their own community kitchens, like in the cities, have been coming together. They come to the farms, and the community emerges and is strengthened, if it already exists, by the connectivity between those different sectors. And so we have been able to materialize this whole process now in one pivoting region in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa, where we have actually been able to succeed at a significant scale, bring in around $30 million worth of property, plant, and equipment into this prototype unit And so with this prototype, we started building other regions, like in the Indigenous nation of in South Dakota, in the Pine Ridge Reservation, in San Miguel de Allende in Guatemala, and other places now. So as we do this, it's not responding. We have also begun to develop a strategy for social impact. And this is something that I've been dreaming a long time. As an immigrant, I identified very closely with the immigrant routes. And as a person who was born in extreme poverty in Guatemala, I understand firsthand what hunger does to people. And I understand firsthand how to solve that issue, because we did solve our hunger problem by deploying one of the first farms in the rainforest that was fully integrated, that was permaculturally based. We produced over 35 different outputs, and we didn't have weed issues. We didn't have bring toxic things into the farm. And we did that also utilizing chickens. And so I have dreamt of this idea that the Catholic Church has so much land, and one of my sisters is a sister of the school Sisters of St. Francis, based out of Milwaukee. And I literally connected a lot with them during my years at agriculture school in Guatemala. And I kept wondering what would happen if we could take all of the land, even just in Guatemala, all the land that the church already owns, and we could build kind of a system of farms that are centered on these ways of managing the land, but do it along the routes that immigrants who are suffering because of their situations in their own homelands are actually following. So from a social strategy, I thought regenerative agriculture, it really isn't about the land as a first thing. It's about people, because it is us who then go and do the things onto the land. And if we are desperate and hungry, we're going to do things out of desperation. So regeneration starts with people, not with the landscape. And so I believe that we have a global opportunity to engage people who are in the most need, which are those who have to be living their communities. And the church has enough lands across the globe to create kind of an underground railroad of sorts, kind of a woofing, go farm and then move through a path sort of situation, if we wanted to envision it that way. Folks in Costa Rica, and then more recently in Brazil, Colombia, and Ecuador, it just hit me that we have an opportunity of mass proportion to actually have a social impact globally by strategically aligning this work with the routes of people, and then engaging them even as they continue to move through their routes, but at least doing it in a way that builds some of that restoration to the landscape that we are actually going to be engaging, and at the same time building infrastructure that is commercially viable, that is economically viable. So with that, I'll leave you with a few more minutes of the time you gave me, but I really appreciate this opportunity to share not too much technology or science behind regeneration, but a true experience where we have taken all of this knowledge that is shared. And as I always say, knowledge isn't what's going to solve the problems of the earth. It's the wisdom to apply the knowledge we already have that will do it. And that wisdom truly comes when we can re-identify with our original identity as creatures indigenous to the earth. Everybody is indigenous to the earth. Nobody is not. We're made of her elements. And as we embrace that identity, then the landscape no longer looks flat. It's three-dimensional. It's a place where energy is transformed. And when we address that three-dimensionality and engage with that indigenous intellect and reclaim our true identity as indigenous creatures of the earth, then the spirituality that goes along with all of those things emerges, and we may become spiritually rich again. So we may see the other 97% of possibilities that we can't see when the landscape becomes a place for production and extraction. That is really the story that we have followed. Those are the teachings that have informed that story. And that little glimpse into the science is the science that allows us to verify that we are doing the right thing.
Reggie, thank you so much for that rich input. Really, you have built on what Molly has given us, and really is very, very, very touching. And we hope that we'll have another opportunity for you to share more with us. I see people are asking questions in the chat. We will come to the question after the third presentation. But you know, translation also is very tiring. We will again listen to a music just to give 1 minute to the translators to breathe, and then we'll come to the third speaker. Thank you. Remember, agriculture is about people, and let us keep this in mind. Again, it's about people, it's about relationship. You see the connection. Molly told that it's a relationship. Reggie tells us it's about people. So let us keep those two words connected. Thank you. Thank you. So now we will go to our third speaker, or let us just still pause a bit because the translation is a bit tiring. So we give a bit of time just to. Okay, so now we go to our third speaker. Our third speaker is Sister Junza. Sister Junza is a member of the Religious Sisters of the Holy Spirit and project manager of her congregation. She leads development initiatives and social entrepreneurship projects for vulnerable communities. She focuses on women's empowerment, sustainable agriculture, and economic development. She holds an MBA and applied business expertise to social innovation. A former referral hospital manager with experience in leadership and administration, promotes food security and sustainable livelihoods, especially for women-headed households. And she's also a member of our Regenerative Agriculture Working Group. So Junza, you're most welcome to share with us. You are talking about small actions in our communities, big impact for our planet and health. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Are you hearing me? Am I audible enough?
Yes, you're okay. Thank you.
Okay. I'll be asking the person moving the slides to kindly do for me.
Yes.
As we are talking about this, we just look at the title itself, that we know that the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor are one and the same. The earth can't cry differently and people are crying differently. We are all crying the same. And that's what Pope Francis told us in his encyclical, the Laudato Si. So we are conscious that environmental degradation and food insecurity are deeply interconnected. Like once the environment is degraded, we are sure that there will be no food around. And climate change, soil loss, and water scarcity threaten vulnerable communities. We've been to places where people have to go long distances to just fetch 20 liters of water to use on themselves and the whole family the whole day. And therefore caring for creation is a shared moral and spiritual responsibility that we really have to take upon. And faith communities are called to respond with agency and action. Something has to be done. So the approach of this presentation is that we are going to learn a small action that the Religious Sisters of the Holy Spirit did as the Emerging Farmers Initiative through their journey, and how this faith-driven community movement is empowering sustainable food production, restoring creation, and transforming their lives through small but impactful actions, very small actions indeed. So we want to acknowledge, first of all, that the global environment and the food challenges that are there, that our planet faces interconnected crisis that threatens both creation and human dignity. Climate change, land degradation, and the water issues, just what I described earlier, are issues that are calling all faith communities to respond. So we are going to focus on the issues that we are struggling with, which have to do with climate change, soil degradation, food insecurity, and malnutrition among children and among adults. Somebody would think there's no malnutrition among adults, but it's very much there. We've seen even malnutrition in pregnant women. We are also looking at rural poverty and sustainable farming practices. These are the things that pushed us to come up with the Emerging Farmers Initiative and begin to do something just at a local level. Next slide, please. So the Emerging Farmers Initiative is one initiative that was created by the Religious Sisters of the Holy Spirit, and its mission is to empower young people for sustainable food production and ecological stewardship. That one, we make sure that as they come to join us, the emphasis is become entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs who are conscious of the environment. And then it also is to respond to youth unemployment, environmental degradation, and rural poverty. We serve in the rural areas of Zambia, and we said we are going to take care of this group of young people that is so energetic, that holds the future of this world and its nature, and form it to become responsible people who will take care of our common home today and in the future, because they are making decisions today that will affect the environment in the future, beginning now. So we started small and growing into a vibrant youth-driven movement. This one, we started with just the young people who have dropped out of school and cannot find employment based on any academic qualifications, but then we say the soil is something that they would work with. Then we are building local capacity for eco-friendly and sustainable farming practices. The community that we are serving are inherently just farmers. So we said we approach them in that same way, but address the farming practices that they are using now, which have not helped our environment. Therefore, we begin to work with the younger ones and change the farming practices. Next slide. So what we are really looking at is restoring soil health. What do we do to restore the soil? Because it's unless the soil is restored that it can be productive. No matter how hardworking we are, if the soil cannot give back, then we can till the land, we can break our backs, but we won't get anything out of Mother Earth. So soil health is the foundation of sustainable farming and food security. The RSHS Emerging Initiative focuses on regenerative practices that rebuild the soil. We had to look at what has happened to our soil. Look at the soil structure and retain moisture and reduce dependence on synthetic inputs, restoring land and a living as a living and productive resource. So in that way, I'm going to share in detail the small actions that we have taken to restore the soil. In this way, we are doing compost production and organic manure use. And I'll show you where we are getting this. Then we also do crop rotation. If you look at the two pictures, that's the same piece of land. In one instant, we had just grown maize. It thrived, it grew, and we harvested. Then after we harvested, we grew tomatoes in that same piece of land, like we rotated to something different, another crop, and we keep reusing the same piece of land, but for different crops at different times. And the impact is improved soil structure, moisture, and productivity. If I told you that the first time we planted maize in that piece of land that you are looking at, we lost everything. It simply dried up. Nothing could support it. The soil couldn't retain the moisture. The manure wasn't there. It just went brown. But now we are able to harvest from what you are seeing in there. Next slide. So that is the kind of combination that we have put together to create the circular ecosystem in agriculture. We have all those things in a small piece of land. We don't have many hectares of land, but to say land utilization is part of what we need to do in regenerative agriculture. So we have set up an area in which both flora and fauna can flourish while complementing each other. So in this space, the Eco-Friendly Agriculture Initiative has put together pig production, has put together poultry production, fish farming, we are doing gardening, we produce our own feeds for the animals, and we have fish, and you can see the youths in the water harvesting the fish. But in all this, kindly move to the next slide so that I just explain how they interrelate. Yes, you see that same picture. So we are using the waste is transformed into resources, creating a self-sustaining cycle that supports livelihood and ecological health. What do we do? You can see a pond full of water in there, but at some point you need to change that water to bring clean water in the fish. So what do you do with the water that you had? We trap that water in some septic tank and make it run into the garden. The garden that you saw in the earlier picture that has fresh maize, that has green tomatoes and all that. So that water is used for watering the crops, the orchard and all. Then you can see that we have a piggery, and in that piggery we keep up to a minimum of 150 pigs that head. They would go up to 200 or 210. And that produces a lot of manure. So does the chickens. All that goes into the fields, and we are able to produce maize, we are able to produce vegetables, we are able to produce whatever greens that we need to feed the people on. And when all that has been done, we are also able to produce our own feeds that go back to the chickens and to the pigs and all in the same space. But what are we doing? We are trying to talk to a young person who might not be interested in looking after pigs. We are giving them an alternative. Come and see what else can be done. You can rear chickens and still supply to your community. That's okay. If they say, I can't stand animals in any way, then we teach them how to produce feeds, and they'll be selling to the other farmers. In that way, it means that the farming ecosystem is fully supplied by the same people, and they are supporting each other and complementing what another person is doing. So like that, we are able to produce both meat products as well as vegetable products to serve the community around us, but each one of these complementing each other and benefiting from the existence of the other enterprise. Next slide. So the aim of this, we have put the Emerging Farmers Initiative around integrated farming. Now, the aim of our work is to be climate resilient. We emphasize, what we emphasize is on a type of farming that both grows crops as well as rears animals in order to survive. When there's a crop failure, the animals and the birds will survive. When there's a disease outbreak, possibly the crops will survive. So there's food for humanity throughout. If somebody has lost all their crops, they can still sell their livestock and buy some food stock somewhere. If they have lost all their livestock, they'll still survive on the other crops that will have survived. So to be climate resilient means that we have to rely both on crops as well as livestock. Therefore, we make sure that wherever we are, there's integrated farming. We don't do one type of farming because you may not survive when the West strikes out of climate change. We've also seen a number of environmental benefits from the practices that we are doing. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of enhanced soil health and water retention that we have seen. Our crops now grow differently. When we bring people to our farm and we tell them there's no grain of fertilizer in here, they would still be wondering, is that true? Then we say, yes, come and journey with us. We've also seen increased biodiversity and carbon capture. We've seen reduced pollution and lower production costs. Like I have mentioned earlier, we used to buy all the feeds from the shops. We used to pay for everything that we bring on our farm, but we are able now to irrigate using solar pumps. We are able to produce our own feeds. We just make sure that whatever is natural to us is what we are utilizing most. In Africa, what we have in abundance is the sun. So why not use solar systems to work with whatever can function in that way? And then the other thing is about producing biogas, so that we are moving towards where I would produce biogas for the heating, the brooding in the chicken houses. We do not have to use charcoal that cuts more trees, but instead we use gas that has been produced from the waste that is from the same farm. And the byproduct of the biogas is organic fertilizer, which still goes back to the other farmers, our surrounding farmers, and ourselves. Next slide. Whom do we target? I mentioned that we target, first of all, the youth. We train them to become successful entrepreneurs, and we train them in class. Like we have a program that runs for 6 months for them, and they are undergoing a training in general agriculture. And when they have graduated, we follow them up in their communities. They start up an agricultural enterprise that suits the community where they are. And we want to make sure that they practice what they learned in class and what they replicate what we are doing at the Emerging Farmers Initiative, because this shouldn't remain at one farm. That one is just a demonstration. It has to go to every community where young people are. So we'll put them in groups of 5, and then they begin their social enterprise, and we follow them up. We also target school-registered pupils. These are being trained at a formative age in order to change the mindset that believes in education as being defined with a white-collar job, and we ensure skilled young people, even if they do not make it academically. And we realize that it's not every child who is cut out for academic excellence. Some do well with their hands. So who is going to tap that potential in them and make them realize they have it? So we have niched into agriculture to just make sure that the young people also, even when they look like that in uniform, they have another set of uniform where they come out of all those ties and jackets. They wear work suits and they go into the field, this same group of pupils. So, and we've made sure that their parents know they have to come with gumboots and they have to come with work suits in order to go to the farm and touch the soil and relate with Mother Earth. We also target the women, particularly focused on women farmers who are either single parents or widowed. We do integrated farming with them, like what I described earlier, to ensure food security in our homes. And in doing this, we have partnered with now 7 other congregations, which makes 8. And so far, we have reached 270 women who have been enrolled since the past year, and they are doing this kind of production in their own homes, to ensure food security where they are. Next slide. We also emphasize on using the resources that are available to us. Those that have rocks around them, they gather the rocks, and this woman has made her piggery using a rocky fencing. She just gathered all the rocks and she's able to make her pig house in there. This other one lives in a forest, and she was making her goat house using the trees and all that we had around her. Whatever resources are available to you, we make sure that they are utilized, but then you have to give back to the soil. Next slide. What are the small actions and big impact? So in there, you've seen that collective small actions within our faith communities can lead to profound ecological and human health transformation. With the Emerging Farmers Initiative, the youth are growing crops and they are rearing livestock for their communities. We tell them, produce for your communities and they'll be buying from you. It will be a source of income for you, but you are being productive and contributing to the well-being of your community. The women are ensuring food security at household levels. You can't count food security starting from a national level. You have to count it at household levels. And we said, if we have to target households, then the women are the best to go to. Because when a woman can never eat alone, she will make sure everyone in the home has eaten something. And the school-going pupils are producing vegetables and eggs for their consumption. This is a boarding school, and we are already teaching them, can you start producing for yourselves and for the nation at large? And the sisters, the religious sisters also are farmers that have been engaged on this program, and they have established demonstration farms to promote education. They have adopted sustainable agricultural practices and responsible consumption. They have gotten involved and support and inspire others to act. So every congregation that we are working with does not work alone. It works with a network of other women and inviting other congregations to participate in the work. You can see the youths there beginning to do their work, and the sisters doing the production and distributing the food to the communities. Next slide. The small action of creating the Emerging Farmers Initiative has now given birth to a now fully registered organization in Zambia that is called the Eco-Friendly Agriculture Initiative, which is a collaboration of the different congregations of sisters coming together. Like you can see in that picture, that is the team that came together, young and old, different congregation, local, international, and whoever came together to work with the women farmers and promote regenerative agriculture wherever we are. And this has now been fully registered. It's no longer an individual's interested like hobby. No, it's now an organization that can operate legally in the country and can still operate even outside. Next slide. So this new birth, the birthing that the Emerging Farmers did has even scaled up. Like we just started from production as sisters. We were just producing agricultural stuff, but now we have gone to common branding. We have our own common brand that shows what we are producing, our own packaging. We have a common market where we are selling our produce, our organic produce from the different farms that we are working with, including the ones for the women. We also, like I mentioned, we increased the number of congregations, like from 5 when we started to 8 now. We have engaged other outgrower farmers, and now we have gone into value addition, like what we are producing, instead of always selling it in form of raw materials straight produced, why can't we value add and process some of the foods that we have, but organically doing so that we don't lose anything that remains natural to us. So this is how these are now growing in the hands of the sisters and the hands of the people that they are collaborating with, the young and the women. There should be one or so slide remaining. So everything goes with, we have our own challenges. It hasn't been smooth like the way I have put it. We've had our challenges, and one of them has been limited resources and climate variability. Sometimes things work, sometimes the weather is just unfriendly. And we've also struggled to access the market, because if we have to continue producing, we know that things have to go at larger scale. It means that we need the market to be able to sell our produce and continue producing. We've also experienced inadequate knowledge on how to produce organic pesticides and how to chase the pests naturally. I was very interested in what I was hearing from the two previous speakers, that there's always a way out and there's a natural way of organizing our farms. It's about people and it's about what is where, what have we put where. And this is probably what I was trying to say, that how do we naturally curb the pesticides without being ecologically unfriendly. We've also learned our lessons that it's always important to start small, work with nature, like what was described earlier. There's natural knowledge, but probably has been buried in a long time and we don't even know how to go back to it. But I was very happy to hear the previous speakers just pick up on how nature works and to build ownership and regenerate the soil. Like, we really have to take it as something that has to be done by us. Those are the lessons that we have learned. I think that marks the end.
Thank you so much. I must say, when I heard from you the first time, I felt like being in the field with you. And today again, I have the same feeling. You know, I really find the three of you have really complemented one another, that I hope our participants have learned something that can help. Really, I like this circular economy, because this is what we need to learn if we are to really be food secure. So thank you so much for sharing your experience. So I think I would now like to ask people, if you have questions, please just put up your hand and ask. I think I have seen also a few questions in the chat. Any question?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Oui.
Thank you for all the presentations. That was so enriching. That allowed us to see that we can really work and try to face the climate change. My question is the following. First of all, question for Reginaldo. How did you do everything that you did? What did you do with the elements that could destroy the plants? Because very often we are pushed to use pesticides, and in this way we destroy the soil. While looking at your photographs, I saw all the plants and everything you produced. Also, there was a worm that destroys partly one plant. So how did you do that? Then a second question. My second question is actually related to the first presentation. I forgot the name of the first speaker. I think it was Molly.
Molly, yes.
Molly, yes. Molly, thank you. So in relation to the floods, when we speak about climate change, we also think about floods. And today there are lots of floods. Even in my country, in Benin, there are lots of floods. So we've realized that the use of plastic and plastic bags are out of our control. And when there is the wind, they fly everywhere, and then they get stuck on the soil, and that is one of the causes of floods. So we should manage these plastic bags properly. So how can we do it? Because clearly we have to do something on a small scale, and then little by little we can move to the large scale. Thank you very much. Those are my two questions.
Okay.
All right.
Oui.
Malifa, to conclude, we started doing something in our congregation, and I think that Edith and Sister Benissa are also listening to this webinar. But anyhow, there is a sister that focuses on agriculture and another sister that focuses on food. She is trying to produce the food and agricultural transformation working on local products. I think she was invited to this webinar. So we started doing something, and as we train the youth, it is very enriching to have this kind of discussions. Thank you very much, Sister Malifa.
Thank you. So Reggie and Molly, any response for Sister Raquel?
Well, I'll go first since she asked about the bug, the worm. Most things that we think of diseases and pests thrive because of the lack of healthy conditions in whether it's a human, an animal, or a landscape. When health is lost in the ecosystem, then pests take over, just the same way as diseases take over a body that lost conditions of health. So the Luna moth is actually not a pest. It's a native species that doesn't create problems. It eats some of the plant, but in agronomy we call it the umbral económico, the break-even point, where beyond that you start to worry about something. In our case, and the reason you saw a lot of that green, lush green stuff, the poultry, similar to fish water is very nutritious. We call it fertigation, because you can fertilize and irrigate at the same time, as long as it doesn't clog your irrigation system. But fish water, let's call it that, it's very effective at delivering nutrients, minerals that are critical for the plant. But the poultry manure, actually, when we did the first nutritional analysis, we found that poultry manure has all of the 13 foundational nutrients that every plant needs in order to be fundamentally healthy. You got to do more, but it basically builds a baseline for you to grow a very large diversity of plants on it. If you want more acidic soil for berries, then you do micromanagement, but you start micromanaging. As a result of that, plants are able to build their own capacity to defend themselves. So that same hazelnut that you saw was actually that whole grove. I mean, remember, 7,000 plus plants. If a bug sees them, smells them, and starts reproducing, it overpopulates really quick. And there is one, we call them Asian beetles, and they can defoliate a hazelnut really fast. They have done this around the Midwest, except on this farm. They came, they settled on the first plants on the edges. And if you study ecology, you will know that plants send signals really quickly to the rest of the plants. And they only attacked the plants on the edges and didn't even defoliate them completely. This is in a space where other farms were completely destroyed. And yet they didn't do that here. But that's because the plant had the capacity to defend itself. And so it's no different than the chicken. The chicken in an open space is also very vulnerable to predators. But we have never lost a chicken to predators. Why? Because we put them in their natural jungle-like habitat, and any creature on the planet placed in those conditions has the instinctive and geoevolutionary capacity built in to defend itself and to protect itself. We all have the instinct of survival. That's what we go for. And yes, it takes a lot more agronomics. There are some baselines that if we follow them, it's like a person. If you exercise, you eat well, you sleep well, you manage stress, you fundamentally are healthy overall. And then if something comes into your body, the body can fight it. There's a point where that is no longer possible, of course, but it is very, if you are healthy, with minor interventions, you can fight back a disease. And that's really what we do in this context, without the time to actually talk about the intricacies of agronomics and all of that. I think that should be sufficient to tell you that, yes, 100% nature has the systems in place. We just have to restore them, help that process so that it does what it can do.
Great. Thanks, Reggie. I'm going to dive into the plastic question to actually follow up on that and also add, it really depends on where you're starting to with the system. Like there have been sites that are full of poison ivy here, which is super invasive where I'm from. And a lot of people, most people get rashes from it. I don't, so it's usually my job to pull it all out. But that's an instance where it makes sense to, in moderation, apply a little bit with a paintbrush by hand, some pesticide to say the end of a cut, poison ivy vine, but not spraying it everywhere, not going everywhere. So sometimes when you have out of control situations already there, like if you had a septic patient, right, you need to give them IV antibiotics, to continue with this metaphor. So it takes a matter of prudence, and what you want to be working towards is some sort of homeostasis. And when you look at the landscapes around us, usually we aren't starting anywhere near that. Usually we're starting with degraded soils, plastic bags everywhere, etc. So onto the plastic bags. I'm not exactly clear like how they I can see if a landscape is full of plastic bags and that water isn't sinking and going down, and it's definitely going to help flood. Just tons of trash is going to actually just reduce the amount of water that's sinking back into the soil, and that's where you're going to get runoff, but from trash rather than hardened soils, for example. In that case, I'm thinking of the amazing work we saw with youth and entrepreneurship, especially from Sister Junza and all of the congregations that are working together. There could be an opportunity to actually do trash collection and enter into a small local circular economy. I've seen, people using plastic bottles that they gather and they fill them with trash, and they incentivize doing that, and then they can create bricks out of it or parts that go into structures. And if that's done well, actually these plastic kind of bottle foundations filled with trash that go into a house can make it more earthquake resilient. And there's people that have made and tested designs on this. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff worth looking into about how people are dealing specifically with plastic waste. There's other things like bacteria that eat plastic that's being tried out and tested. But I think for practicality at this point where things are standing with, advancements in technology, the best way to do it is figure out how can you contain that trash so it's not everywhere, and how can you put it somewhere that's perhaps putting it to use and putting it within a structure where you would already be using maybe not all natural, materials necessarily. And where can even maybe enhance those?
I don't know if I see that is very interesting, but time is time is against us. So if you have questions, please send them to us. We can send to the presenters, and then they can answer, and we send them to you. So we have only 5 minutes left, and I would like to invite Father Vincent for the conclusion of our webinar. Sorry about cutting you short. We would have loved to continue, but the translators also are tired. They need to go and rest, and we have other things. So Father Vincent is a Claretian missionary from India with experience in pastoral ministry, education, and social development, Executive Co-Secretary of Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation Commission of the Union of Superiors General and the International Union of Superiors General, former member of the JPIC working groups on creation, migration, and anti-trafficking. He worked in tribal development and community empowerment initiatives in India. He holds a PhD in political science and degrees in philosophy and English. He served as professor, social work director, provincial superior, and published author. So, Father Vincent, you are welcome to conclude our webinar.
Good day to everyone. As we come to the close of this webinar on caring for creation and protecting our food, a shared responsibility, I'm here to express heartfelt thanks. At the outset, the Regenerative Agriculture Working Group of JPAC Commission deserves our thanks for taking initiatives for arranging this webinar. A heartfelt thanks to you, dear participants, for your enthusiastic participation. And we could see there were 132 participants. Our sincere thanks to Sister Rael Togbe for her warm welcome and introduction, and to Sister Celine for leading us in prayer and reminding us that our care for creation begins with our relationship with the Creator. We are grateful to Sister Malifa for the Executive Co-Secretary of JPAC Commission, who had been a great instrument in organizing this webinar and in facilitating it. A special word of appreciation goes to our speakers. Molly, who spoke on land ecology, principles of ecological design, and regenerative agriculture case study. It is very important to note that regenerative agriculture is in the teachings and the traditions of the Catholic Church she quoted. We thank Reginaldo. Today, we live in a world where we consume medicine as food. Some of us take more medicine than the food. But Reginaldo has inspired us to eat the food as a medicine so that we are remaining healthy and the planet becomes healthy. He has also demonstrated the responsible food production and consumption through the story of Salvatierra Regenerative Farms. We are grateful to Sister Junza. She has taught us through her experience the Emerging Farmers Initiative, which empowers the youth people for sustainable food production and ecological stewardship. Of course, we also thank our translators who have worked very hard for helping us to overcome language barriers and enabling all the participants to engage fully in this webinar. Our gratitude extends to the technicians and technical support team whose dedicated work behind the scenes ensured that everything runs smoothly. Thank you for your valuable service. Now, as some of you know, Lucia Sorrentina has been Assistant Secretary in JPAC Commission, and she is finishing a responsibility here. Lucia, we are deeply grateful for your dedication, generosity, and commitment. As you conclude this period of service, we thank you sincerely and wish you God's abundant blessings in the future. May the good seeds you have sown continue to bear fruit. As we leave today, may the fruits of this webinar be seen in our lives and communities. Like seeds planted in fertile soil, may the ideas shared today bear fruit through simple but meaningful actions, such as growing food where possible, reducing waste, conserving resources, and promoting regenerative agriculture in our communities and ministries. Thank you once again, and may God bless you all.
Thank you, Father Vincent, for that wonderful conclusion. And we are inviting all of you, join our working group. Just send us a mail and you will be part of the working group so that we need to promote regenerative agriculture so that we can push the commercial farmers out of the way. They are stealing the lands of poor people, and they're producing chemical food. We eat, we fall sick, we go to the hospital, we are bombarded with more medicine, and we die before our time. We cannot allow this to continue. Please, let us unite and promote. We can eat clean food, as Reginald told us. Food is medicine, not the chemicals that they propose to us. So you are all welcome, and thank you very much for being here. I was so happy to see Father Vincent did 130, but I have seen up to 138 participants. Let not this webinar just be another webinar. Please take action where you are, even if it means taking the plastic container, fill it with soil and plant something. Put it in front of your house and let it produce. I see all kinds. Using plastic containers, plant tomatoes, and you see the tomatoes are doing very well. Let us stop buying the chemical food that make us sick. Thank you very much. God bless you. Bye.